Embracing the quiet power of aging. 10 Buddhist lessons for living fully after 60. Have you ever felt like time is slipping away, but something inside of you is stirring, awakening, as if to say there is more to discover? The truth is, growing older can be one of the most confusing and daunting parts of life. Our bodies change, roles shift, and the world around us keeps moving faster, leaving us behind, or so it seems. But what if I told you aging isn't the beginning of the end? What if, instead, it's the beginning of something far more powerful, something you've been waiting for your entire life? What if it's the doorway to clarity, peace, and self-discovery? In this video, we're diving into 10 timeless Buddhist lessons that will change the way you see aging. These lessons are not just philosophies. They are tools that will help you embrace the later years of your life not with fear, but with peace, purpose, and quiet joy. Because getting older is not about fading away. It's about becoming the most authentic version of yourself. Stay with me until the end of this video. It's packed with practical wisdom that will guide you through the ups and downs of aging and show you how to live your best life, no matter your age. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss a chance to discover more about living with intention, peace, and wisdom. Lesson 1. Impermanence is inevitable, Anicca. One of the most profound teachings the Buddha left us with is the concept of impermanence, Anicca. He taught that nothing in life is permanent, not our youth, not our beauty, not even the roles we play in the world. From the moment we take our first breath, change begins, and it continues until our final exhale. Our bodies grow older, our faces soften, our movements slow, and the mirror sometimes shows us a reflection we barely recognize. But the Buddha's message isn't one of despair, it's one of understanding. We are not meant to hold on to time as if it's ours to keep. The truth is, impermanence is the natural flow of life, and embracing it is the path to peace. When we resist change, we suffer. When we accept it, we open ourselves to growth, transformation, and deep contentment. Take, for example, the story of a grandmother who looked at her wrinkled hands and felt sadness wash over her. She had spent decades of her life nurturing others, her children, grandchildren, and the community. But now, as her hands aged, she felt as though time had passed her by. One day, her daughter noticed her and asked, "Mom, why do you look so sad?" The grandmother looked at her hands again and said, "I've lived a full life, but I don't recognize these hands anymore." Her daughter smiled gently and replied, "Mom, those hands are maps. Each wrinkle tells the story of love, loss, and laughter. Those lines are not flaws, they are the markers of a beautiful journey." The mother's words brought peace to the grandmother's heart. She had always seen aging as a form of loss, but now she understood that it was a sign of the fullness of life. Each wrinkle was a reminder of the life she had lived, a life rich with stories, lessons, and love. Aging was not the end, but a beautiful continuation of the story that had already been written. Aging, in the Buddhist view, is not a calamity. It's simply life doing what it has always done, changing, moving, becoming. It's only when we cling to what was, when we wish for a time that is no longer ours to hold, that we begin to feel the weight of time. The Buddha's wisdom teaches us that when we let go of our attachment to youth, beauty, and time, we make space for a new understanding. The acceptance of impermanence as an integral part of life's unfolding journey. This acceptance does not mean resignation. Rather, it is a deep and peaceful knowing that everything, our lives, our bodies, our relationships, is constantly shifting, growing, and evolving. In this, we begin to see time not as an enemy but as a precious companion, teaching us to live fully in each moment. Instead of fearing the passage of time, we learn to honor it. Just as the ocean's waves constantly ebb and flow, so does our life. The beauty of the ocean isn't in the stillness of the water but in its movement, the rhythmic rise and fall that gives it life. Aging is just another wave in this vast, endless ocean. In accepting impermanence, we release the fear that often comes with aging. The fear of losing what we have, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of death itself, all dissolve when we learn to embrace the present moment. Letting go of the past allows us to experience life in its fullest form, no matter our age. Imagine your life as a story being written with each passing day. The lines on your face are the words on the page. They are not there to remind you of time lost, but of all the moments that have shaped you. Those moments, each one, whether filled with joy, sorrow, struggle, or peace, have led you to where you are now. They are beautiful. When you stop fearing time and instead accept it as part of the natural flow of life, you begin to see each day as a gift. The wrinkles, the gray hair, the slower steps, they are not signals of decline. They are signs of a life well lived, a life that has experienced the depths of both sorrow and joy. And that, my friend, is something to be celebrated. So when you look in the mirror, don't search for flaws. Look for the story. Embrace it. For every wrinkle is not a mark of time lost, but a testament to the life you've lived and the wisdom you've gained. Your journey is just beginning, again and again and again. Embrace the beauty of aging, for it is the opportunity to grow more fully yourself than ever before. Lesson 2. You are not your body. As we move through life, we cannot ignore the changes that come with aging. Our bodies shift, the skin softens, the joints ache, and the pace slows. The once vibrant energy we felt as a child becomes a distant memory, and we are faced with the inevitable truth that change is constant. But here's a teaching from the Buddha that cuts through this fear and confusion. You are not your body. The Buddha's message is clear and transformative. The body is merely a vessel. It is the house you inhabit during your time in this world, but it does not define who you are. Just as the body rises and falls like a wave in the ocean, your essence, the awareness behind your eyes, remains unaffected. It doesn't wrinkle, it doesn't age, it doesn't get tired. It watches, it learns, it stays. Think of it this way. Your body is like a passing cloud, and you are the sky that holds it. The sky doesn't disappear when the cloud changes shape or moves away. It remains constant, vast, and ever-present. So too does your true self. The awareness within you remain unchanged even as your body evolves. Consider the life of an elderly woman named Clara. She had spent her younger years in constant motion, chasing goals, building a family, and working tirelessly. But as she grew older, Clara began to notice the changes. The stiffness in her knees, the aches in her back, the sagging skin around her face. She would look in the mirror and think, I don't recognize the person looking back at me. I used to be vibrant, strong. Who is this old woman now? One day, her granddaughter noticed her looking forlorn in front of the mirror and asked, Grandma, why do you look so sad? Clara replied, I miss the old me, the one who could do everything, the one who didn't hurt all the time. Her granddaughter smiled and gently touched Clara's hand, saying, Grandma, that may be your body, but it's not who you are. You're still the same person who laughed with me, who shared your wisdom with the world. Your spirit hasn't changed, even if your body has. This moment was a turning point for Clara. She realized that the person she had always been, the one who had loved, laughed, and learned, wasn't her physical body. It was her essence, her awareness. And just like the Buddha taught, that awareness never ages. It doesn't wrinkle. It simply is. When we start to realize that we are not our body, we begin to free ourselves from the anxiety of aging. We stop attaching our self-worth to how we look or how our bodies function. Instead, we begin to understand that our true identity lies in the awareness that watches life unfold. We are the experiencers, not the experienced. Our body may grow tired, it may change, but our spirit, the essence of who we are, remains constant, untouched by time. Take the example of Tom, a 65-year-old man who had spent most of his life obsessing over his appearance. As he aged, he started to see his reflection more often: thinning hair, wrinkles, and sagging skin. At first, he couldn't bear to look at himself. He was filled with fear and disappointment, trapped in a mindset that told him he was losing himself. But one day, Tom's friend, an elderly monk who had seen much of life, shared this wisdom with him. "Tom, you are like the ocean. The waves will rise and fall, but the ocean itself, the essence of it, never changes." This struck a chord with Tom. He began to understand that his true self was the ocean and his body the waves. While the waves may crash and recede, the ocean remains vast and serene. This new perspective gave him a sense of peace. He began to honor his body, care for it, but no longer identify himself solely by how it looked or how it felt. He knew that the essence of who he was, the one who saw, felt, and experienced life, was untouched by time. Think about this. If you stop identifying with your body, a profound freedom arises. You begin to see that the body is a tool, not the essence of you. It is a vessel for your spirit, a temple that holds your awareness, but it is not the sum of who you are. And when we let go of our attachment to our body, we stop fearing its changes. We free ourselves from the shackles of vanity, aging, and decay. Imagine waking up every morning and feeling light, not weighed down by the thoughts of how your body looks or feels, but focused on the immense beauty of the life within you. Imagine living with the knowledge that you are the one who sees, who feels, who experiences, and this awareness is timeless. The Buddha encourages us to honor our bodies, to care for them, to nourish them. But we must never confuse the body with who we truly are. Just as a car needs fuel, maintenance, and care, our bodies require the same. But just as the car is not the driver, the body is not the self. The true self is the one who experiences life, not the physical form that ages, changes, or decays. This realization brings peace. It brings freedom. It allows us to live each day with grace, knowing that our bodies are just the shell and our awareness, the real us, is eternal, untouchable by time. The next time you look in the mirror, don't focus on what has changed. Instead, recognize the timeless spirit that is looking back at you. Recognize that you are not your body. You are the presence behind your eyes, the awareness that watches life unfold. As you honor your body and care for it, remember that it is just a vessel. It's your spirit, the part of you that cannot be touched by time. That is the real you. And that, my friend, is what makes you eternally young. Lesson 3. Suffering comes from attachment, tanha. In the Buddha's teachings, one of the most profound truths he offered was that suffering does not stem from aging itself. No, the real source of our pain, our struggles, and our frustration comes from something much deeper: attachment. We become attached to the way things are or the way things used to be. We cling to our youth, our health, our roles, and our routines. This attachment, this grasping at what we cannot hold forever, is what causes us to suffer. The Buddha explained that suffering arises from craving, the insatiable desire to hold on to things as they once were, to freeze time, and to remain in a state we believe is safe or comfortable. When life inevitably changes, when our bodies begin to age, when our roles shift, or when our loved ones move away or change, we feel the sting of loss. But the change itself is not the problem. It is our resistance to change, our attachment to the past, that causes our suffering. Think about it. When you resist the flow of life, when you desperately cling to something that is already slipping through your fingers, the resulting pain is inevitable. Aging becomes painful not because it is inherently bad, but because we fight it so hard. We refuse to accept that everything, our bodies, our minds, and even our identities, is in a constant state of flux. There's a story about a man named James who had spent his entire life focused on his career. He worked long hours, climbed the corporate ladder, and identified so deeply with his role that he couldn't imagine his worth outside of it. When he was suddenly forced into retirement at the age of 65, James felt the world crumble beneath him. The idea of no longer being important, no longer having a title, a purpose, or a routine terrified him. He felt as though he had lost his identity. One afternoon, he sat in a park, overwhelmed by sadness. A woman who had been walking her dog sat beside him. After a few moments of silence, she asked him why he looked so lost. "I don't know who I am anymore," James confessed. "I've always been defined by my job, my position. Now that I no longer have that, I feel empty." The woman smiled kindly, offering him a simple yet profound piece of wisdom. "You're not defined by what you do, James. You are defined by who you are. And who you are never changes, even when your role in the world does." What if you could let go of that old attachment to being the boss and simply allow yourself to become something new? Her words hit James like a wave. Slowly, over time, he learned to release his attachment to his career. He began to rediscover passions he had long forgotten: gardening, painting, and volunteering. He was no longer attached to the need for external validation. Instead, he learned to find meaning and purpose from within. James's story is a powerful reminder that attachment to a past identity, a role, or a routine can keep us locked in suffering. When we let go, we make space for something deeper to emerge, a new sense of freedom, peace, and joy that is not reliant on what the world expects of us, but on who we truly are inside. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean that we abandon what we love or what has brought us comfort. Letting go means softening our grip on things that no longer serve us, on things that are slipping away anyway. It means acknowledging that life is always changing, and that's okay. When we stop trying to control the uncontrollable, we begin to experience true peace. Imagine the relief of no longer resisting time, no longer struggling against the changes that come with it. It's like setting down a heavy bag you've carried for far too long. The weight is lifted, and suddenly you feel lighter, freer, and more open to the present moment. You are no longer tied to the past or fearful of the future. You simply are. This process of releasing attachment is not about giving up. It's about liberating yourself from the weight of expectations, whether those are your own or the world's. It's about giving yourself permission to grow in new ways, not outward but inward. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us that the true purpose of life isn't to cling to what is fading away, but to embrace what is constantly unfolding. Imagine waking up tomorrow, free from the need to maintain any external image or role. Imagine loving yourself, not for what you do, but for simply being. What would that feel like? It would be like stepping into a new chapter where you are free to explore, to grow, to become the person you were always meant to be, without the pressure of trying to hold on to what's already gone. Think about the elderly woman who finally gave up her decades-long attachment to the need for perfection in her home. Her children had all grown up and moved away, and she found herself alone with piles of clutter in every room. For years, she had kept everything in order, believing that if her home wasn't perfect, she wasn't a good mother. But after years of cleaning and organizing, she decided to let go. One afternoon, as she stood in front of a closet full of old belongings, she let herself release the need for perfection. Her home wasn't flawless, but it was filled with memories, and that was enough. As she let go of the need to control her environment, she found something amazing. She found peace. Her house became a reflection of her life, not a place of constant striving, but a place of rest, joy, and acceptance. And in that, she learned that true peace comes when we stop trying to hold on to things that are no longer meant to stay. The Buddha taught that suffering comes from attachment, from the grasping and clinging that keeps us from living fully. Letting go is not a sign of weakness. It is a step toward true freedom. It is a step toward inner peace, where you are free from the expectations of who you used to be and open to who you can become. In this season of life, allow yourself to grow, not outward but inward. You do not need to stay the same to be whole. In fact, the only way to become whole is to release what no longer serves you. Let go and allow yourself to step into the fullness of your being. Lesson 4. Every wrinkle is a teacher. In the teachings of the Buddha, there is an undeniable truth that comes to us with age. Every wrinkle on your face holds a story. Each line etched into your skin, every crease formed over the years, is a record of a life well lived, a map of your journey. A wrinkle from the laughter shared with a child, a line formed during a tearful goodbye, the furrowed brow created in moments of worry, or the softening of the eyes after years of witnessing both joy and sorrow. These marks are not signs of decline, but signs of ripening, the natural process by which life teaches us its deepest lessons. In a world that chases youth and perfection, we often view aging as something to avoid or fear. The media bombards us with images of eternal youth, and we're made to feel as though aging is something that takes away our worth. But in Buddhism, the path to wisdom is not about running away from age. It is about embracing the changes that come with it. The Dharma honors depth, the wisdom we accumulate through lived experience. Aging, in the Buddhist view, is an unfolding of this depth, not a fading away of vitality. The Buddha taught that true wisdom doesn't come from reading books or collecting accolades. It comes from living, from experiencing the full spectrum of life, and from learning to accept what comes without resistance. The wrinkles we carry are the traces of this wisdom, testaments to the challenges we've faced, the people we've loved, and the lessons we've learned along the way. In each wrinkle there is a teacher, and as we age, we are given the profound gift of becoming those teachers to others. I want you to pause for a moment and reflect on this. Wisdom is not in avoiding age. It is in embracing it. The challenges you've faced in your life, the deep love you've given to those around you, the quiet losses that have shaped your soul, these are not things to be hidden or feared. These are the very experiences that have shaped your understanding of life. In Buddhist philosophy, the idea of impermanence teaches us that all things, our bodies, our possessions, our roles, will change. But what remains unchanged is our capacity to learn from everything we've encountered and the wisdom that arises from those experiences. The more we embrace aging, the more we learn to see life's impermanence not as a source of fear, but as an invitation to grow deeper, to become more fully ourselves. Think about the elderly man, Joe, who spent his youth as a successful lawyer. As he reached his later years, he began to notice the familiar lines on his face, the graying hair, the weight in his bones. One day he found himself standing in front of the mirror, quietly examining his reflection. Joe had spent most of his life focused on success, on winning cases, on maintaining a sharp mind. But now, as he stared at the face staring back at him, something shifted inside him. Instead of seeing a body that was slowly fading, he saw the traces of a life filled with meaning. Each wrinkle was a memory of the battles he had fought, the love he had given, and the moments of grace he had received. Joe's reflection wasn't a loss, it was a celebration. Those wrinkles weren't marks of time slipping away. They were reminders of a life well lived, a life that had experienced both joy and sorrow, success and failure. And suddenly, Joe realized something profound. He was no longer the young man who had once been driven by ambition. He had become someone deeper, someone whose wisdom could now guide others. His wrinkles were not flaws, they were his teachers, showing him how far he had come and how much he still had to give. This moment of realization is not an isolated one. It is the experience of many as they grow older. When we let go of the fear of aging and instead embrace it, we begin to understand the richness that comes with time. We are no longer defined by what we look like or how fast we move, but by the depth of our character, the strength of our spirit, and the wisdom we offer. When you look in the mirror, I invite you to look beyond the surface. Do not search for flaws. Instead, search for the stories, the smiles, the tears, the moments of fear and courage, the joy and sorrow that have shaped you. See the lifetime of learning that is etched into your face. Each wrinkle is a testament to your resilience, your growth, your journey. Every line is a teacher, and you are becoming the lesson. There is a beautiful story in Buddhist tradition about an old monk who had lived for many years in the mountains. His face was lined with wrinkles, and his hands, though weathered, were steady. One day, a young monk came to him and asked, "Master, how do you find peace as you age? The world says that youth is where the joy of life is, but I see that you have something far deeper." The old monk smiled and replied, "You see these wrinkles? They are the marks of wisdom. They are the proof that I have lived through all that life has to offer, both the hardship and the joy. With every wrinkle, I have learned to surrender, to accept, to embrace life as it is. The real joy comes not from running after youth, but from accepting the fullness of each moment as it is." The young monk looked closely at the old monk's face and saw something new. In the eyes of the old monk, there was no sorrow for the passing of time, only an unshakable peace, a stillness that came from deep wisdom. The young monk realized that peace comes not from avoiding age, but from embracing the life we have lived. As we age, we learn to understand the deeper truths of life. The wrinkles on our faces are not reminders of what is fading. They are testaments to everything we've gained. Every wrinkle is a teacher, every gray hair a reminder of our journey. Instead of seeing aging as a loss, see it as a deepening of your wisdom, your compassion, and your ability to teach others through your presence. When you look in the mirror, Look for the lessons you have learned, for you are becoming the wisdom you sought. The Buddha's teachings tell us that the deepest wisdom comes not from avoiding age, but from embracing it fully. Aging is a process of ripening, not of decline. So when you face your reflection, let it remind you of the beautiful teacher you have become. Lesson 5. Aging sharpens compassion. There is a quiet transformation that happens as we age, a deepening of our ability to feel. As we grow older, we find that we begin to feel more, not less. We feel more for others, more for their struggles, their pains, their joys. It's as if with each passing year our hearts grow larger, more expansive, and more attuned to the world around us. In Buddhism, compassion, or karuna, is considered one of the highest qualities of the heart. It is not something we are born with in its fully ripened form, but something that ripens over time. Think of compassion like a fruit growing on a tree. At first, it's small, tender, and maybe a little bitter, but as we live through life, it matures. The more we experience, the more compassionate we become. The Buddha taught that compassion isn't just an emotion, it's a way of being. It's the ability to see the suffering in others and feel a profound connection with them. True compassion comes when we recognize the shared humanity in others, when we realize that, no matter our differences, we all walk this path of life together. Aging opens the door to deeper compassion because we've lived enough life to understand what it feels like to struggle. We've all faced challenges that shaped us, perhaps in ways we never expected. Over time, we experience losses, mistakes we cannot undo, and moments where we carry burdens silently. We may have smiled through grief, pretending to be fine, even when our hearts were breaking. As we age, we don't just accumulate years, we accumulate experiences. These experiences shape our ability to understand others. As young people, we may rush to fix things, to offer solutions, to ease the pain. But as we grow older, we realize that sometimes the best thing we can do is just be present. The need to fix things fades, and in its place grows a deep understanding. Consider the story of Maya, a woman who had spent her youth caring for her children and building a career. After she retired, she found herself lonely, spending more time thinking about her late husband who had passed away many years ago. One day, her son called her in a panic. His daughter had just been diagnosed with a serious illness, and he didn't know how to handle it. Maya could hear the fear in his voice, but as she listened, she didn't rush to offer solutions or try to fix everything. Instead, she said simply, "I know what it feels like to be scared. I've been there. Let's take this one step at a time." Maya had lived through her own fear, her own loss. She had carried burdens that felt unbearable at times, and now, at this stage of life, she could offer her son something she hadn't been able to give him when he was younger, the wisdom of experience. She didn't need to fix his situation. What he needed was understanding, compassion, and a reminder that he wasn't alone in his pain. Maya had grown in her compassion over the years, and now she could offer it to him in the deepest, most meaningful way. The older we get, the more our hearts soften, and this is not a weakness, this is wisdom. As we age, the ego, the part of us that fears vulnerability and clings to being right or in control, begins to soften. With that softening comes a natural widening of the heart, a growing capacity to love, understand, and accept the world and its people without judgment. This isn't about becoming less strong or less capable. It's about becoming stronger in our hearts. Aging doesn't diminish our capacity for love, it amplifies it. The more we experience, the more we understand that we are not separate from others. We all bleed, we all lose, and we all long for peace. There is a shared humanity in that, a universal truth that connects us all. Think of Grandpa Joe, a man who, in his youth, was proud and often judgmental. He was quick to criticize others for their weaknesses, their failings, and their mistakes. But as Joe entered his 70s, he found that his perspective shifted. He had experienced loss. His wife had passed away, and he had struggled with his health in recent years. He started to see that everyone carries a story. Everyone has faced challenges, and everyone has a reason for their pain, their actions, or their choices. One afternoon, while visiting a friend in the nursing home, Joe overheard a conversation between two of the nurses. One of them was speaking harshly about an elderly resident who had become forgetful and often repeated the same stories. Joe, who had once been quick to judge others, paused. He looked at the elderly woman and said, "We've all been there. We all forget, we all grow tired. Let's show her patience as we would want when our time comes." This moment of compassion was not something Joe had read about or studied in a book. It was something he had lived. The wisdom of aging had softened his once hard heart. And in that softening, he could now offer compassion instead of judgment. He didn't just understand the woman's suffering. He could feel it because he had walked through his own version of it. When you notice your heart softening as you grow older, trust it. Trust that it is the wisdom of compassion waking up within you. This isn't something to fear or resist, it's something to embrace. The more we age, the more we realize that what matters most is connection, not achievement. It's kindness, not perfection. It's presence, not power. In the end, compassion is what connects us all. It is the highest expression of the heart, the deepest form of wisdom. When we feel someone else's pain, we no longer rush to fix them. We simply sit with them, listen, and offer the understanding that comes from shared humanity. Aging sharpens our compassion because, through the challenges we've faced, we have learned the deepest lesson of all. We are all in this together. Our wounds, our losses, our victories, these are the threads that weave us into the beautiful tapestry of life. And as we grow older, we begin to see the world with more heart. And that, my friends, is one of the most beautiful gifts of aging. Aging is not a loss. It is a ripening of the heart. Every year, every experience, every struggle deepens our ability to love, to forgive, and to understand. Compassion is not something we lose as we age. It's something we gain, something that becomes richer and more refined. So as you grow older, remember this. Your heart is not shrinking. It is expanding, becoming more open, more kind, and more wise. Embrace it, for in your wisdom lies the true power of your love. Lesson 6. Let go of the illusion of control. In our younger years, we often live under the illusion that we are in control. We control our careers, our bodies, our routines, and even our futures. We try to manage every detail, believing that if we just have the right plan or the right strategy, we can prevent misfortune, avoid failure, and control the outcome of our lives. For much of our youth, we hold on to this belief with fierce conviction. But as we grow older, we begin to recognize something quietly profound. We were never really in control. The more years we accumulate, the more we realize that life unfolds in ways we could never predict. And no matter how hard we try to control it, life has its own rhythm, one that can't be forced, tamed, or completely managed. The Buddha's teachings remind us that the illusion of control is one of the main sources of our suffering. We try to control things that are fundamentally uncontrollable, like the passage of time, the course of our health, or the choices of those we love. When we resist the flow of life and demand that things go a certain way, we invite suffering into our hearts. The truth is, control is an illusion, and it is this very illusion that binds us to frustration and anxiety. Consider the story of Sarah, a woman who spent the majority of her life meticulously planning every detail of her existence. Sarah was a successful businesswoman who believed that by controlling her environment, she could control the outcome of her life. She carefully constructed her career, her relationships, and even her health routine, thinking that if she just followed the right steps, nothing would ever go wrong. But one day, Sarah's world was thrown into chaos. Despite her efforts, her health suddenly took a turn for the worse. She was diagnosed with a chronic illness that no amount of planning or healthy living could have predicted. In the years that followed, she watched as her carefully laid plans crumbled. Sarah's body, which she had once controlled with precision, no longer obeyed her. At first, Sarah fought the diagnosis. She spent years trying every treatment, changing her diet, exercising obsessively. But no matter what she did, her illness didn't go away. It wasn't until she found herself in a quiet moment of reflection, sitting on a park bench, watching the seasons change, that Sarah began to accept a simple truth. She couldn't control everything. In that moment, a peaceful surrender washed over her, as if the very air around her whispered, "It's okay to let go." This realization didn't come quickly, but when it did, Sarah found that the weight of resistance had been lifted. She no longer tried to control every aspect of her life. Instead, she learned to embrace the uncertainty, allowing her to live more freely and fully in the present. The illness didn't go away, but Sarah's perspective changed. She learned to respond to life with acceptance, not resistance. The Buddha's teachings show us that control is an illusion, and that suffering arises when we try to control the uncontrollable. We spend so much of our time trying to manage outcomes, striving for perfection, only to find that life will always move beyond our grasp. The more we age, the more we come to see that life's rhythms can't be forced. Time passes, health fluctuates, people make choices that we can't influence. The Buddha taught that the path to peace is not found in control, but in surrender. Surrender is not about giving up or resigning to fate. It is about waking up to the truth that life will unfold as it will, regardless of how much we try to control it. And when we release the need to control, we free ourselves from the suffering that comes with resistance. Think about it. Imagine if you didn't have to fight every moment of your life. What if, instead of desperately trying to hold on to your plans, you could simply let go of the need to control every outcome? What would it feel like to live each day, not with the anxiety of managing everything, but with the peace of knowing that you are responding to life as it comes, instead of trying to force it into a mold? Take John, an older man who, after years of attempting to control every aspect of his children's lives, found himself deeply frustrated. John had always believed that if he could just guide them correctly, his children would never make mistakes. But over time, his children began to choose their own paths, sometimes contrary to his advice, and John found himself angry and resentful. His rigid need to control their choices created a wedge between them. One day his daughter, Emily, came to visit and in a moment of honesty said to him, "Dad, I love you, but I need to live my life on my terms, not according to your vision of it." John felt a sharp sting of rejection, but in that moment he realized something. He had spent so much energy trying to control his children's lives that he had forgotten to honor theirs. The Buddha's teaching echoed in his mind. We cannot control others, not their decisions, not their pain, and certainly not their paths. Slowly, John learned to let go of his need to control. He started to trust his children to make their own choices, even if they weren't the choices he would have made. The peace that followed was profound, and as his attachment loosened, his relationship with Emily deepened. Letting go of control doesn't mean giving up on life. It means waking up to the truth that peace comes when we stop forcing life to fit into our narrow expectations. It's about recognizing that we can't control time. It flows as it will. We can't control health. It fluctuates with age. And we can't control other people. They must walk their own path just as we must walk ours. When we let go of control, we stop fighting against life. Instead, we respond to it with grace, with acceptance, and with love. The way forward isn't through rigidity and force, but through adaptability, trust, and a deep willingness to surrender to life's unfolding. Imagine a life where you didn't have to struggle against time, against aging, against change. Imagine not waking up every day feeling like you're racing against the clock. What if instead of striving to control every outcome, you could embrace the natural flow of life, with all its unpredictability and imperfection? This doesn't mean we stop caring or trying. It means we stop trying to force things. We stop trying to make life happen on our terms. When we let go of control, we discover a peaceful rhythm, one that allows us to live fully in the present, without the constant pressure to make everything just right. Letting go of control doesn't mean giving up. It means opening ourselves to the flow of life. When we release our attachment to outcomes, we discover freedom. Freedom from fear, from anxiety, and from the illusion that we can control everything. We learn to trust the process of life, respond to it with grace, and find peace in the simplicity of being. Lesson 7. Presence is the greatest gift of aging. As we grow older, something profound happens. We begin to appreciate the present moment in a way we never could when we were younger. In our younger years, our minds were filled with thoughts of the future. What's next? Where are we headed? How can we achieve more? The world seemed like a race, and we were always running to catch up. But as the years pass, we start to notice something extraordinary. The future no longer pulls at us as strongly. It becomes a quiet companion, instead of a demanding taskmaster. The past, too, loses its grip on us. We stop carrying the weight of old regrets and begin to free ourselves from the need to relive past mistakes. Instead, the present moment begins to emerge with more clarity. We realize that the greatest gift of aging is presence, the ability to experience the here and now, fully and without distraction. The Buddha taught that true peace comes from living in the present moment. In his teachings, mindfulness, sati, is a central practice that invites us to be fully aware of each moment as it is, without judgment or expectation. Aging provides us with a natural opening to this practice. The more we age, the more we realize how precious each passing moment is, how fleeting time truly is. Think about the simple moments in life, those small, often overlooked treasures that come with the gift of aging. Perhaps one morning, you sit by a window and watch the light slowly change across the floor. The sunlight spills across the room, shifting in patterns that reflect the time of day, and you notice the way it makes the walls glow. For the first time, you really see it, not as something in the background, but as a moment unfolding before you. The warmth of the sun on your skin, the quiet hum of the world outside, this is mindfulness. Or maybe you find yourself savoring a cup of tea, not rushing, not looking at the clock, not thinking about what comes next. You notice the warmth of the cup in your hands, the fragrance of the tea, the way the steam curls up into the air. For once, you are fully immersed in the simple act of drinking, of being, of just existing in the present moment. These are the experiences that aging brings us. As we get older, we begin to notice more and more of these moments, because the mind becomes less distracted by the future and less burdened by the past. The present moment, the only true moment we have, is revealed to us in its full beauty. There is a beautiful story about an elderly monk who spent his days sitting beside a small pond, quietly watching the water ripple with each passing breeze. When a visitor asked him, "Why do you sit here all day just watching the water?" the monk smiled and replied, "When I was younger, I was always seeking something, always searching for a goal. But now I sit here with the water and it is enough. The present moment is all there is. The past is a memory, the future is an illusion, but right here, right now, there is peace." This monk had learned something profound, that the simple act of being present is a form of meditation, a form of mindfulness that brings us back to the true nature of life. The water was not rushing to go anywhere, nor was it looking back at what it had already passed. It simply was in that moment. And in that moment, the monk found everything he needed. The older we get, the more we realize the value of simply being rather than doing. It is through our lived experiences, the ups and downs, the challenges and victories, that we learn to embrace the present. The younger generation may be obsessed with doing and achieving, always rushing toward the next goal, the next milestone. But with age comes the wisdom to appreciate stillness. We begin to see that there is peace in doing less, in taking a step back, in not constantly running towards something. Aging teaches us to slow down and enjoy the ride instead of trying to control it. In Buddhist philosophy, mindfulness isn't about striving to be mindful. It's about letting go of the need to force the mind into the present moment and instead simply allowing ourselves to be fully present. When we do this, we discover that life, in all its simplicity, holds an incredible depth of meaning. Take the example of Mary, a woman in her 70s who spent most of her life chasing after success, chasing after recognition, chasing after the next big thing. She ran herself ragged for years, never truly stopping to appreciate the quiet beauty around her. But after retiring, Mary found herself with more time and space, and something surprising began to happen. At first, she struggled with the quietness. She missed the constant rush of activities, the always-on schedule. But over time, she began to savor the little things. The sound of birds outside her window, the way her flowers bloomed each spring, the way the sunlight felt as it streamed through her living room in the morning. Mary began to realize that these small moments were the most precious. She didn't need to chase after anything anymore. She had already lived her life and accomplished much. Now, it was time to simply live, to experience the fullness of each moment without the distraction of goals or the anxiety of what's next. This shift in her mindset wasn't sudden. It came gradually, with the quiet wisdom that aging offers. She was no longer chasing after life. She was simply present with it. The gift of aging is presence, the ability to fully experience life as it is, without the pressure to rush, without the burden of what has been or what is yet to come. Mindfulness teaches us that peace doesn't come from accomplishing more or accumulating more, but from simply being here in this moment. As we grow older, we are given the opportunity to slow down and truly appreciate life in its simplest form. The next time you sit down for a meal, take a walk, or share a conversation with a loved one, ask yourself, am I truly present in this moment? If not, take a breath, let go of the distractions, and allow yourself to just be. You may find that in the end, this is the greatest gift of all. Presence is the gift of aging. It's the ability to experience life deeply, to savor it in ways that the younger self may have missed in the rush of life's constant movement. Aging brings us the wisdom of mindfulness, the wisdom of being fully here. And that, perhaps, is the greatest treasure we could ever find. Lesson 8. Stop comparing your path. One of the most subtle and often unrecognized forms of suffering in our lives is comparison. It quietly seeps into our minds, creating a sense of inadequacy or longing. We compare our health, our wealth, our relationships, our achievements, and wonder why we don't measure up. Why don't we have what they have? Why aren't we as successful, as happy, or as fulfilled as others seem to be? The comparison game often leaves us feeling less than, always chasing something that feels just out of reach. But in Buddhism, we are taught that comparison is not a source of wisdom. In fact, it is a distraction, a form of craving. The Buddha spoke often of craving tanha as the root of suffering, and comparison is one of its most deceptive forms. We crave to be like someone else, to have what they have, to walk the same path they walk. Yet in doing so, we lose sight of the truth that is uniquely ours. The more we compare, the more we push ourselves into a cycle of dissatisfaction. We begin to believe that our lives are not enough unless they mirror someone else's success, beauty, or happiness. But this mindset only distances us from the peace that comes with accepting our own journey, in its own time, with its own pace. The Buddha's wisdom teaches us that true fulfillment comes not from following someone else's path, but from honoring our own path, our unique truth. When we begin to understand that comparison is not wisdom, we are liberated. The truth of our lives is not meant to be a replica of someone else's. Each person's journey is deeply personal, shaped by different circumstances, experiences, and choices. To compare ourselves to others is to miss the beauty of our own story. As we age, the temptation to compare might become stronger. We look back at our youth and wonder if we did enough, if we achieved what we were supposed to. We see others around us, some thriving in their careers, others enjoying family life, and we might feel like we've missed something along the way. But in that very moment, we are invited to let go of the need to compare and instead to honor our unique path. This is the invitation that aging offers us, to stop chasing someone else's dream and to start embracing our own. Think of Lena, a woman in her early 60s, who had spent most of her life comparing herself to others. She looked at the accomplishments of her peers, friends who had successful careers, beautiful homes, and families, and she couldn't help but feel that her own life had fallen short. Despite having a fulfilling career in teaching and raising 2 children she loved deeply, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't enough. She thought, why didn't I accomplish more? Why didn't I travel the world or build the life I envisioned? One day, Lena went to visit a friend, Maggie, who had spent most of her life living according to her own set of dreams. Maggie had always lived simply, without grand ambitions for material wealth or status. As Lena sat in Maggie's cozy, cluttered living room, she realized something important. Maggie's life was full of contentment, not because it matched any conventional measure of success, but because Maggie had never compared her journey to anyone else's. She had simply lived her truth, and that was enough. Lena's realization came like a soft wave, and she suddenly understood. Her life was beautiful because it was hers. The comparison had only kept her from fully appreciating the richness of her own experiences. From that day on, Lena made a conscious effort to stop comparing her life to others. Instead, she began to focus on the beauty of her own journey, the joy of teaching, the love she had for her children, and the simple peace she had created for herself. When we stop comparing ourselves to others, we free ourselves from the cycle of dissatisfaction. The truth of our lives is found in appreciating what is uniquely ours. The people around us, the lives they lead, and the paths they take are not meant to be mirrors of our own. Each life is a unique expression, and comparison only distracts us from living our own truth. Think of the river that flows quietly, without concern for the path of the river next to it. It doesn't look at the other river and wish to be like it. It simply flows in its own direction, carving its own path. Your life is like that river. It is not meant to flow exactly like anyone else's. It is meant to move according to its own rhythm, to find its own course, and to nourish the world in its own way. There is freedom in letting go of comparison. Your life is not a copy of someone else's. It is a reflection of your unique essence, your experiences, your values, and your choices. You are not meant to achieve what someone else has. You are meant to experience life in the way that only you can. Take John, a man in his 50s who spent years looking at his friends and colleagues, feeling like he was falling behind. John had always been the quiet one, content with his small business and the simple life he had built. But he couldn't help but feel that he should be doing more. His friends had bigger houses, fancier vacations, and impressive careers. One day, after years of comparison, John took a trip with his wife to a quiet mountain retreat. As they sat together by the fire, John realized that his life, though different, was no less valuable. He had built a life rich in love, family, and authenticity, and there was nothing more important than that. He learned that comparison was robbing him of his peace. In embracing his own path, John found a deep sense of gratitude for the life he had created. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. How often do you compare your journey to others? What would it feel like if you stopped measuring your life against someone else's standards? Imagine how much more you could appreciate the unique beauty of your own path. The truth is, comparison is a distraction. It pulls us away from the present moment, away from the truth of who we are. When you stop comparing, you will begin to see the richness of your own experience. You will start to appreciate the lessons that have come from your struggles and the joys that have shaped your path. Your life is not meant to be a copy of anyone else's. It is meant to be a truth, your truth. When you let go of comparison, you find the freedom to live authentically. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be. Appreciate the beauty in your path, and you will discover the peace that comes with honoring the life you've created. Lesson 9. Be a lamp unto yourself. In the final years of his life, the Buddha imparted a profound teaching that has echoed through the centuries. Be a lamp unto yourself. This simple yet powerful statement carries layers of meaning, especially as we grow older. The Buddha was not merely offering a command to shine brightly like a beacon for the world. He was pointing us toward a deeper, more intimate wisdom, the wisdom to guide ourselves, to look inward, and to trust the light within us. As we age, there is a natural shift that occurs. In our youth, we often look outward for answers, seeking approval, seeking guidance, seeking validation from external sources. But with age, the Buddha invites us to change our perspective. We are invited to stop relying so heavily on external validation and begin to trust the wisdom that life has carved into us. The more we live, the more experiences we accumulate, and the more we realize that the answers we seek are often within us, waiting to be uncovered. The light of wisdom is not some distant, external force. It is the quiet, steady presence within, built over years of learning, experiencing, and reflecting. As we grow older, we begin to see that we hold the key to our own peace and clarity. We no longer need to look outward for guidance. The wisdom to navigate life's challenges, to meet every situation with grace, is already within us. Consider the story of Helen, a woman in her 70s who spent most of her life seeking approval from others. Helen had always been a people pleaser, a caretaker, someone who felt validated only through the admiration of those around her. As she aged, however, Helen began to feel a sense of unease. Her children had grown up and moved away, and her once thriving career had slowed. The approval she had once sought from colleagues and family seemed to slip further out of reach. One evening, while sitting alone in her living room, Helen reflected on her life. She thought of all the times she had tried to fit herself into the expectations of others, how she had shaped her choices to please her parents, her friends, and even her spouse. But now, with the weight of age on her shoulders, she realized that the one person she had neglected the most was herself. Helen recalled the Buddha's teaching, "Be a lamp unto yourself." For the first time, she truly understood it. She realized that her wisdom was not to be found in the approval of others, but in the stillness of her own heart. She began to trust her own judgments and experiences, slowly allowing herself to make decisions that honored her own values, not the ones she had borrowed from the world. She realized that, after all these years, she was her own guide. From that moment on, Helen began to embrace the quiet wisdom that had been developing within her over the years. She stopped seeking others' approval and began making choices based on what felt right for her. Her calmness, her presence, her ability to be compassionate toward others, this was her light. She didn't need to preach or seek validation. She simply needed to be herself, grounded in the wisdom that came from living a full life. The Buddha's teaching to be a lamp unto yourself is not just about being self-reliant. It's about recognizing the inner wisdom that has been cultivated over the years. It's about knowing that you have within you everything you need to find your way through life. You become a light for others, not by preaching, but simply by being calm, compassionate, and present. True leadership in the Buddhist sense does not come from external authority. It comes from embodying the qualities of compassion, peace, and understanding that arise from years of living and reflecting. As you grow older, you don't need to prove yourself to anyone. Your presence, your calmness, your compassion, your ability to listen, becomes the light that guides those around you. When we stop looking for answers in the external world and begin to trust the wisdom that resides within, we unlock a power far more transformative than any external validation. You are the lamp. Think of Eleanor, a woman in her 80s who had always been a quiet, humble figure. Throughout her life, Eleanor had been a loving wife, mother, and grandmother, but she often felt overlooked. Her family adored her, but she couldn't help but feel that she hadn't achieved the great things her peers had. She never sought the spotlight or accolades, and this often left her feeling like she was just getting by. However, in her later years, Alina began to realize something. The wisdom she had accumulated over the years was her true legacy. Her ability to listen deeply, to offer a kind word at the right moment, to provide solace with just her presence. These were the gifts she had to offer the world. She didn't need to do anything grand. She simply needed to be present, to share the quiet strength that came from knowing herself, from trusting the lessons she had learned through her life. Her family began to turn to her for advice, not because she was a businesswoman or a famous leader, but because she had the kind of inner wisdom that could only come from a life well lived. Alina's light was not in her words, but in her being, in the way she carried herself with calm and kindness. She had become a beacon, not by teaching or striving, but by simply living with awareness, humility, and love. The greatest gift of aging is the realization that you are the lamp you have been seeking. You do not need to look to others for guidance or approval. You have within you the wisdom to guide yourself, to navigate life's challenges with grace, and to offer light to others just by being present. The question is, will you trust that wisdom? Will you let go of the need for external validation and begin to trust the wisdom that has been growing inside you all these years? As you age, you are invited to step into the fullness of your own wisdom. Being a lamp unto yourself means no longer searching outside for answers. It means turning inward, trusting that the light you've been seeking is already within you. You have lived enough to know that the answers lie not in the future, not in other people's opinions, but in the stillness of your own heart. So, trust in your own wisdom. Be your own lamp. Your light will guide others not by force or effort, but by the quiet strength of simply being present and authentic in every moment. You are already the guide you've been waiting for. Lesson 10. Death is not the end. In the Buddhist view, death is not an ending but a transition. It is part of the natural flow of life. In our culture, we often treat death as a final destination, a full stop to the story of our lives. But in Buddhism, death is simply one chapter closing and another beginning. Everything in life, including ourselves, arises, changes, and eventually passes away. Nothing in this world is permanent, and death is simply part of the same process that governs all things, impermanence. The Buddha's teachings emphasize that death is not to be feared but to be understood. Death is not a cessation of existence but rather a transformation. We, as human beings, are not static entities. Just as we change throughout our lives, death is the ultimate transformation, where the physical form changes but the essence of who we are continues. The love we shared, the kindness we gave, the actions we took, all ripple out into the world and live on in others. This fundamental understanding of death can bring immense peace. Instead of fearing death or seeing it as the ultimate end, we can begin to view it as another part of life's journey. We prepare not through fear, but through understanding, clarity, and acceptance. Death, in this light, becomes not something to avoid, but something to embrace as a natural part of existence. Take, for example, David, a man in his late 70s who had lived a life full of both joy and sorrow. He had spent decades building a family, working hard, and giving back to his community. As the years passed, David began to feel the inevitable signs of aging. His body grew frail, and he found himself thinking more and more about the end of his life. Like many, he feared what would come after, unsure of what would happen to his essence once his body ceased to exist. One evening, while sitting in his garden, David had a conversation with his daughter, Laura, about his fears of death. She listened patiently as he spoke of his worries, about whether his life had mattered and what would become of him when he was gone. Laura, who had been studying Buddhism for several years, shared a teaching that had brought her peace. "Dad, in Buddhism, death is not seen as the end. It's a transition, like the turning of a page in a book. The stories we live, our kindness, the love we give, the lessons we teach, don't die when we do. They live on in others. The love you've given to us, the way you've shaped our lives, that will stay with us forever." David paused, taking in her words. He realized that his essence, the love, the guidance, and the joy he had shared with his family, could not be extinguished. The fear of death began to melt away, replaced by a sense of peace. He didn't need to worry about the end of his physical form. What mattered was that he had lived fully, and that the love he had shared would continue to affect those around him for years to come. Message: death does not take the essence of who we are. It only transforms it. The love we've given, the kindness we've extended, and the actions we've taken all live on in the hearts and minds of those we've touched. These are the ripples we create throughout the world, and they do not disappear when we leave. Instead, they continue to inspire, comfort, and guide long after we are gone. Our essence, our spirit, lives on in the memories and actions of others. The Buddha taught us that instead of fearing death, we should begin to prepare for it with clarity, peace, and understanding. We cannot escape death. It will come to us all. But we can prepare for it by living with purpose, knowing that every moment we live, every act of compassion we perform, and every bit of love we share becomes part of the fabric of life itself. Death is not the end of our story. It's a new chapter in the endless cycle of life. Consider the story of Elena, an elderly woman who had spent much of her life involved in charity work. She had seen many of her friends and loved ones pass on over the years, and she knew her own time was coming. Yet she never feared death. Instead, she accepted it as an inevitable part of her journey. Elena had spent years helping others, whether through volunteering at the local shelter or offering counsel to those in need. As she aged, she became less focused on her personal desires and more centered on how she could continue to serve others. One of her greatest joys was in mentoring younger women, teaching them the values of kindness, patience, and selflessness. As her health began to fail, Elena reflected on her life, and what stood out the most was the ripple effect of her actions. One evening, while lying in bed, Elena spoke to her granddaughter, Amelia, about her life's work. "I know my time is near," Elena said, "but I am not afraid. The love I've given, the lessons I've shared, those things don't vanish when I go. They continue to grow in you and others. That's the greatest gift of all." Amelia nodded, tears in her eyes, knowing her grandmother's legacy was much more than her physical presence. Elena's essence, her wisdom, her spirit would live on in the hearts of the people she had touched. Think about the love you have given, the kindness you have shared, and the wisdom you have passed on. These are the gifts that live on beyond your time here. When we understand that death is not the end, but a transition, we can live without fear. We can embrace the reality of impermanence, knowing that what we contribute to the world, our actions, our love, our wisdom, does not vanish with us. Death may take away our bodies, but it cannot take away our impact, our essence. The way we live, the way we love, the way we guide others, These things are eternal. The real question is not what happens after we die, but what we do while we're here. Death is a part of life's flow, and when we understand it as a transition, we are freed from the fear of its arrival. We are reminded to live fully, to embrace each moment with love, and to understand that the impact we make in this world extends far beyond our physical existence. When we live with intention, our essence will continue to ripple out, touching the lives of others long after we are gone. Let us not fear death, but instead live our lives in a way that honors the truth that our love, our actions, and our wisdom transcend this lifetime. Aging is not the end of your story, it's the deepening of it. You see, these 10 lessons aren't just pieces of advice. They are invitations. Invitations to let go, to see more clearly, to love more deeply, and to live with greater wisdom. We've been conditioned to believe that time is something we're running out of, but the truth is, you are not running out of time. You are arriving into yourself. Every year, every moment brings you closer to the truth of who you are meant to be. So, as you move forward, walk gently, walk with courage. And remember, you are not alone on this path. The wisdom you carry within you is a light that could very well be exactly what someone else needs to find their way. Thank you for walking with us today. Stay with the journey. The lessons you've learned here are yours to carry and to share. Let the light you've discovered shine brightly, for it is the wisdom of those who have walked before you and those who will follow. If you found value in this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. There's more to discover on this path, and we can't wait to walk it with you.